we wrap up the 115th Congress, which will be my last one as North Dakota's U.S. Senator, we thought we would do our last episode of the Hotdish by bringing back a dear, dear friend and my predecessor, former U.S. Senator Kent Conrad. And he's going to be turning the tables, as we say in the Hotdish world, on me and actually being the interview, and I'm going to be the interviewee. And so I'm going to turf this over to Ken Conrad, who is a dear friend. And when people ask me, I just have to say this. I said, when people ask me, who is your political mentor, it just keeps coming back to you, Kent. From that time you walked into my office in the tax department and said, I think you should run for political office. And I said, no, I'm never going to do that. And then every turn of the way, you're kicking my butt out the door, telling me to get going. And so, I
apologize. I really feel bad about it.
You know, and I know we wouldn't have given up one day of opportunity to serve North Dakota. But as we transition, it is important to kind of reflect back on the legacy and the history of what we've been able to accomplish, I think, and how we will continue the fight for the middle class, how we'll continue the fight for farmers, for the people that we serve. And I know, Kent, you carry that with you, still fighting the budget fight, still fighting the retirement fight, still trying to affect public policy that's important for America going forward.
Well, you're absolutely right. And, it is an incredible honor that we had to serve here, that you have had to serve not only here, but as tax commissioner and attorney general, and a candidate for governor of the state of North Dakota. So you've got a proud history, and I tell you, you can leave here with incredible pride. So I understand that nearly half the Senate turned out for your farewell speech.
Yeah.
Now that is truly remarkable. I can only think of one time in all the time I served here that there was that kind of a turnout for a senator and their farewell speech. So what do you think?
Well, I mean, it made it harder to give it because first off, you're so moved by the friendship and so gratified by the outpouring of support. But then you get into that, they're all here. Now I can really tell them what I think. So I got a little wound up and hopefully offered some words of wisdom. It was interesting, Kent, because someone asked me, what advice would you give to someone coming in? And I hadn't really thought about that question, but after some reflection, what I've said is I would tell them to write their farewell speech, then live by it.
Boy, what a great idea.
Yeah. So sit down that day.
What are you going to do?
What are you going to do? What do you want to be able to say when you're walking out the door?
Yep.
And then read it and live by it. I remember a story you used to say about how you would write down the 3 things that you were going to do that day and look at them in the morning and repeat them and repeat them and repeat them. And, I think it's that kind of discipline to stay focused on the bigger things that made you so effective.
So looking back, what are the things you're going to take with you that you're most proud of?
Well, I think the friendships, obviously, but I think the stuff that I'm proud of, it always surprises people. It's the work that your staff does back home. Getting Andy Shaw as Purple Heart, and I know you were there when I told that story many times about a Korean War vet who never got his Purple Heart. Amazing man, spiritual man, and it's so moving the ceremony was. His whole community turned out to thank him for his service and to support him. But I think that you have a list of things that are important economically to your state. 2 farm bills. I mean, think about that in 6 years, 2 farm bills. We had a delay on the first one, so when we did it in 14, we then knew that we had to come back by 18. This is the best bipartisan farm bill I think we've ever passed, and we played a big role in it. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of the work I did on oil exports. That, people look at the oil economy in North Dakota and they say, well, it was always going to be this way. But if we didn't allow exports of crude oil, the posted price for North Dakota crude would probably be $20, $30 less than what it is right now. And so I'm enormously proud of that economic advantage that I gave North Dakota and American production.
I just say this to you. You think about the 2 drivers of North Dakota's economy, agriculture, still number one. Oil and energy, number two, but hugely important. And you played major roles in strengthening both. And you did it in a bipartisan way. I think, and I looked at a list of senators who were at your farewell speech, a lot of Republicans. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is so unusual in this place, to have respect and affection demonstrated by people on both sides. And in those numbers, Heidi, that is truly remarkable.
Yeah.
So you can wear that with a badge of honor.
Yeah. Maybe they just all wanted to make sure I was leaving, Kent.
Well, I think some of the leaders maybe.
but the other piece, and probably the piece that when people say you can't get anything done, that I think illustrates the work that I was able to do, was something called 45Q, and that's the carbon capture sequestration tax credit, which is instrumental to building technologies. Those technologies are going to be essential if we're going to continue coal-fired electrical generation in this country. And so I was able to bring Mitch McConnell and Sheldon Whitehouse, co-sponsors on this bill, and was able to get it
maybe
passed.
Never happened before.
Ever happened. But what I told people who said, how do you do that? And I said, I knew I couldn't get anyone to agree on whether we needed to address climate. Obviously Sheldon believes firmly that water levels are, especially for a state called Rhode Island, that maybe ought to pay attention to sea levels. Mitch represents, like I do, a coal state. But the problem is that you got to find common ground, and I knew that the common ground was in technological development and investing in technology. And so we're able to get Barrasso and Shelley Capito and Sheldon, and we built this incredible coalition that will continue hopefully after I'm done. But the tragedy of this, and I know there's a lot of North Dakota listeners, is that and I said this when I was campaigning in coal country. I said, look, if you think that you don't need someone in the Democratic caucus who understands this industry, who understands electrical generation, who can speak truth about redundancy and reliability, and who has credibility, you're wrong. And now, after I'm leaving, there's no one who is going to talk about those issues. And, this is the threat that you're under when you buy into one political party, and you don't buy into advocacy. Who's your best advocate? And I'll tell anyone in North Dakota, for the coal industry, I have been the best advocate in this delegation.
No question. Absolutely no question.
And they're going to miss that.
Yep. They're going to miss that, and it's not just going to be North Dakota that's going to miss it. Because, what seems from outside, what seems to be most lacking here in this institution is this ability to work together. So what you were just talking about is, I think, one of your most remarkable accomplishments, because you brought together groups who have never been together, or very rarely. So you bring together the environmental community, the coal industry,
the
labor, and get them to work together to actually pass something that's going to make a difference to the economic future of an industry. Now, that's a huge accomplishment for North Dakota and really beyond.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. So, in these final days, what is it that you hope that people in North Dakota remember you for?
That I worked hard.
Well, you certainly did that. But you know what? Some people work hard but don't get results. The amazing thing about you, and I said on the campaign trail, I think when the history of this period is written, they will say that no senator in North Dakota's history got more accomplished in their first term than Heidi Heitkamp. We talked a little about the Farm Bill. We talked about legislation that allows the export of our oil. We talked about legislation to strengthen the future of the coal industry, which, by the way, also strengthened the future of renewables.
Yep.
Because you got key credits extended there for wind energy that make a difference across the whole country. So are there things about you that you wish people knew more about? Is there something that about Heidi Heitkamp that you think people maybe don't know that you'd want them to?
I tell a story, and I think this isn't probably something people don't know, but when I was doing the tobacco settlement, I was negotiating for the small states, and basically what it was taking 13 small states and holding up the big states so they give us more money, right, under the formula. And there was an attorney general in Indiana who was responsible for the allocation formula, as we said, the formula that would divide up this huge pot of money. And eventually I got like 500 million more dollars for all the small states, each individually, not collectively. And when this happened and they voted on it, the attorney general from Indiana said, this is ridiculous. This is absolutely ridiculous. The only reason anyone's doing this is because you all like Heidi. I said, I'll take it. I'll take it. No, I think that maybe it's a lesson for people, because I think that there is this kind of expression, nice guys finish last. It's never been my experience. My experience is, when you're nice to people, when you're respectful to people, when you listen, when you try and understand everything from their perspective, and you respond in a way that's not, just platitudes and yeah, I hear you. When you respond and say, I think we can fix it because of, and that, Kent, you taught me that, that there's always a way to weasel in, get your way by listening, but also by the tenacity. I mean, I think there's so much I learned from you. And one thing that I learned is that turn a problem around and around and around until you find the solution. And that was one of the lessons I learned really early on working for you. I saw you do it in the legislature. I saw you do it with a lot of complicated issues that we dealt with in the tax department. And you always found a way to bring people together to get results. And I had a great mentor, not just politically in you, but a great mentor in terms of leadership and problem solving. And I learned a lot. And I've taken those lessons and hopefully built on them. And what I hope people will take away is that we now have so many kids that I've been able to mentor. We have had so many experiences working with other people that maybe they've taken a little bit of that Kent Conrad tenacity and that Kent Conrad problem solving that I learned, and they can take that forward in their life.
Well, we hope. And let me ask you this. What do you think most needs to change in this institution? I think people from outside look at this and they say, gee, we got a lot of big problems facing the country, and a lot of these things don't get taken care of. What's wrong down there? How do you answer that?
I say two things. Number one, we have structural problems. We've handed over way too much power to leadership. And individual members no longer, have, and this may sound contradictory when I give the next thing, but individual members are no longer have the ability to work with other members that aren't in leadership to basically get problems solved. It's always, maybe. And I blame kind of this politics infiltrating leadership of the Senate, and it's an equal problem on both sides. I said the leaders of the Senate back when you started were the leaders of the Senate. They were not leaders of their political party. They were not leaders of an ideology. They made the trains run on time. They recognized big problems and said we have to solve big problems. We've lost that because now the motivation is winning above all else. So individual members need to take back their individual responsibilities on behalf of their state. Now, with that said, this is going to sound contradictory. There's two ways you pass bills. You either have a full-on floor fight, and where you amend unless they fill the tree, which happens way too often now, but that's stuff you don't all need to know about, listeners. But, it's a complicated procedure to get a bill, heard on the floor. The other way is you pass them by unanimous consent. And unanimous consent means one jerk in this place can stop a bill that 99 people in the Senate believe needs to pass. And that needs to change. We need to either hold that one person more accountable, or we need to fix the rules so that it's not unanimous consent, but maybe consent by 90%. Because that power of that one person, it's oversized based on, and it creates incredible frustration here. I mean, it's like what's happening to me now with the House holding up a couple bills. One person over there. That's the history of the House. The House is run by leadership and by committee chairs. The history of the Senate is everybody comes equal. Yes, you respect the process and the committee process, but you go to committee markup. You know how many markups I did that really mattered in my 6 years, Kent?
How many?
One. 2155, which was our Dodd-Frank reform bill. I sat for 7
That's
hours.
the banking reform
Yeah.
bill that helped open up credit for banks, credit unions across North Dakota and across the country.
Another thing,
Very big thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And another
bipartisan.
yeah, and wouldn't have happened probably if I hadn't been there.
Well, it would not have happened.
Yeah. So this bill, and it was mainly taking votes on amendments that my colleagues on the Democratic side wanted to force down in this bill and saying no to stuff I would agree to otherwise. But we sat there in a markup. And so when the bill came out, it had the legitimacy of that committee process. You don't see that anymore. How many bills come up just out of committee with straight party votes?
Yeah.
It's crazy, and we need to have more dialogue. And I said in Homeland Security, we need to sit around the table, not on the dais, but around the table and actually have a conversation about what we want to do in committees. And I'm very proud of the work that we got done. And a lot of the big stuff that got done, was leadership from the middle, and I think leadership that I played an important role in.
Looking at the current makeup of the United States Senate, you're seen as a centrist. You're seen as somebody that can work with both sides. So what does it say about this place that somebody like you, who was incredibly effective at getting things done for our state, gets defeated?
I think that everybody talks about how partisan Washington's gotten. The country's gotten more partisan. And certainly North Dakota, where when, it always has been, a Republican-leaning state. But yet you could peel off 20% of the Republicans who voted for you. Can't. It's not true anymore. There's been national stories written, and I think it's true in North Dakota, that only about 4 or 5% of the people who identify as Republicans would actually vote for a Democrat. There aren't enough independents in North Dakota to make a difference. It's now a majority Republican Party. So the headwinds were pretty serious. But the irony of that is people say, we need people to be bipartisan and work across the aisle. But they're not bipartisan.
Right.
They're not willing to
cross over
and vote for results as opposed to party labels.
Yeah. No, it's a disheartening thing to see. But, there's hope. Because just as we say that, we also saw resounding victories in many House districts across the country where people did cross over. People who were nominally Republicans decided, hey, it's time to give Democrats a chance because they're the more moderate person in the race. Mm-hmm. So what would you want young people in North Dakota to learn from your experience? You've been general counsel in the tax department. You've been the tax commissioner. You've been attorney general, candidate for governor, United States senator. From your experiences, what would you want young people who might be listening to think about what role they might play?
The one thing is you'll never know if you can win, and you'll never know if you can lose if you don't get in the arena. And I've been great friends with Cindy and John McCain, and they have the McCain Institute now has an In the Arena kind of hashtag that really encourages people to get involved in civic leadership, get involved in political leadership. And so I'm saying I do something to young people that I talk to. I ask them a simple question, and it's maybe schmaltzy, I don't know, but what would you attempt to do if you knew you couldn't fail? And what I said yesterday in my farewell speech is, look, we have a culture of failure in the Senate. We've developed a culture of failure where a good idea can be recognized as a good idea, but it's never going anywhere because that can't happen. I can't tell you the number of times when I said, well, that will never happen, or where it was told to me. And one thing that I proved, I think, especially with oil exports, no one thought we could get that done in a year. And I kept saying there's no good reason not to do it. But when you work really hard, when you have a really good idea, and against all odds and against everybody telling you it can never happen, if you believe you can get it done, I think you can. And if you're smart about how you work and you're willing to work hard, you can achieve great things. But you will never do it if you start out saying, it can't happen, or I can't do this. And so that's why I think it's so important, even though it's maybe boilerplate. What would you attempt to do if you knew you couldn't fail?
What a great question. Yeah. Yes, we can.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, we can.
Well, there I go. I get so much grief for saying "there you go," but it's true. Yes, we can.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, we can. We can make a difference. And that, don't be frustrated. And Kent, the first race I ever ran, which you forced me to do, I lost.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But it put me in a position to be appointed tax commissioner, which
Yeah.
led to an amazing political career. And I loved every job I had. I loved every minute of being tax commissioner. I had to clean up a big mess from my predecessor. That would be Kent
That would
Conrad.
be
No.
me.
No, my big worry when I was tax commissioner was, how am I gonna come up with new innovations that could ever surpass Byron Dorey and Kent Conrad? So, following in many ways, following bad leadership is easier than following good leadership, and I've done both. And I don't want to, the Attorney General's office was a different experience than taking over for you in the tax commissioner's office, and then obviously felt the weight of this seat. And people say, why did you run? And I said, because this was Quentin Burdick's seat and Kent Conrad's seat, and I don't think somebody should just inherit it without a fight. And so I got into the fight because I knew that I was the best equipped person to carry on the legacy of Quentin Burdick, to carry on the legacy of Bill Langer, whose seat you and I both had, and to carry on the legacy of Kent Conrad.
Well, you've done a brilliant job. So what's next?
It's hard to say. Like I said, one issue that I tackled that I'm very proud of is the issue of childhood trauma. I think when we look at a lot of the socioeconomic challenges we have, the healthcare challenges, behind all that is this dynamic of the lack of resiliency, especially in children. And when these children who have experienced trauma become adults, they have record amounts of addiction, record amounts of death by suicide, economic challenges, educational challenges. And so I really think we need to think differently about how we deal with our socioeconomic problems. And we need to build a more resilient population. And the disparity between opportunity for rich and poor is just getting worse. And so I intend to be very, very active in the issue of childhood trauma. I was able to get a third of our bill. I've led on this issue. I care about it deeply. A third of our childhood trauma bill got embedded in the opioid bill. And I care deeply about what's happening with foster kids. And so Native American programs, I'm just, my advocacy for Native people will never end. That to my dying breath, that will be important to me. And then just the economic issues, that I've inherited an interest in from you. Debt and deficit. I think you can be a great asset still in that debate, and I think I can be a great asset in that debate. I used a line in my speech, and I've stole it from Byron Dorgan, but the line is, we are the first generation that has inherited from our parents, who are the greatest generation, and we're borrowing from our kids. And these are systemic problems that we all have to be concerned about, and we have to look at solutions. And I know you're in that fight. You're in the fight on retirement security. So one thing you taught me was to look up. Don't just deal with today's issues. What's coming on the horizon that's problematic, that's going to challenge American dominance. And you and I share probably a different vision of trade than Byron does, but I think these trade policies and the economic challenges of a global world are passing us by because we don't have the right attitude. If you think about it, I tell young people when I talk to them, I hold up my hand and I say, remember the number 5, if you remember nothing else. And they kind of look at me like, what's that? And I said, the United States of America is less than 5% of global population. And when you're my age, it'll be less than 3. If you are not engaging, if you're not actively engaging globally, America will lose its economic dominance. And so that doesn't mean that we need to hand over and be patsies on bad trade agreements. I agree with that. But we need to understand that this debate that we're having about nationalism versus globalism is ridiculous. It's like debating whether the sun comes up in the east. We have to be global to be successful.
Absolutely. Let me ask you this. What do you see as the greatest threat out there to America's future? And what's the biggest opportunity?
I think the greatest threat to America's future is that we don't invest enough in our kids. And the education of our kids and the health care of our kids. I think that at the end of the day, America's superiority is about investment in people. And I always tell people, what's the difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party? So the Democratic Party always invests in people, not institutions, not corporations, but in human beings, and believes that when we give human beings that opportunity, they will excel, they will prosper, they will make us proud. I think that the greatest opportunity that we have out there is our kids. I've met so many amazing young people, and our commitment to the future, that we are still an incredibly optimistic country that believes that we can again lead, that yes, we'll hit bumps, but those are just the speed bumps of life, and we will continue to be the amazing country that we are because we have a foundation that is so solid called the United States Constitution. And I believe in the United States Constitution. I believe in the foundation of our democracy, and I believe in our way of life and our government.
So when people want to hear more from Heidi Heitkamp in the future, where are they going to look?
I don't know.
Where will they find you? Well,
they may find me trying to talk smart on some news shows, that kind of thing. But I hope that we can still keep up some podcasting, that we can still have an influence. It's hard to know, Kent. You continue to have a great voice through the bipartisan commission. And letters, and people look to you still for advice on debt and deficit. I hope that people will look to my advice and look to my counsel on the issues that I care about.
Here we are, 2018. Can you ever see yourself running for political office again?
No. I'm still bleeding out from the last one. There's a time that comes and a time that goes, and I looked at this and said, okay, another term puts me at 68. That's about right. I mean, you retired before you were 65, or right at 65.
Yeah, 64.
Yeah, so that gave you an opportunity for that second chapter to be an elder statesman. Think about that. And I'm 63. Kent. So I'm just a year younger than you are, even though you were here longer. And so I have a lot of opportunities to look at other things. But this political system needs to be fixed. It's broken horribly. And
can I just say this? So I'm going later this year to New Hampshire and to Iowa, and announcing the draft Heidi Heitkamp campaign for President of the United States. And I'm going to get just as I did, just as I got you drafted to run for state auditor when you were a young woman.
You're going to have
to. So I've got a bus, and what we're doing is we're getting that plastic, that was on your campaign bus. Yeah. We got that ordered. We're bringing that out, and we're starting in New Hampshire and Iowa. And I think, they say there are 31 people who are looking at running for president. I've just announced number 32.
Can't turnabout is fair play. And there might be a draft Kent Conrad,
I'm too old.
No, trust me. Yeah. You've seen the...
Oh, yeah, I guess that's right. I'm young.
You're young. Oh, Kent, it's always great to be with you.
Yeah, it's great to be with you.
Thank you so much.
We're very proud of the incredible contribution you've made to North Dakota and the incredible results you got here in the United States Senate for our state and for the nation. Thank you, Heidi Heitkamp.
To the extent that you want to take any responsibility for me, I think you know the big role you've played in my life. I love you to death. Love Lucy, too.
I love you. And, I'll be looking for you in Iowa and New Hampshire.
You'll be alone. I'm Senator Heidi Heitkamp. Thanks for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this week's helping of the Hot Dish.